This week on Getting to Know Jew, we talk with Coleen Dieker. Dieker is a multi-instrumentalist songleader who records Jewish music with Rabbi Josh Warshawsky, plays Spanish and Portuguese music with Ensemble Iberica, and rocks out with her group Flanigan's Right Hook. So we talk a lot about music and Jewish songleading. Coleen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Lev. It's so good to be here.
So I wanted to start out by asking you something maybe a little silly. You're a renowned musician across many different styles and instruments, everything from secular to Jewish contemporary music. Why is Kansas City at the heart of your career and musical journey? Tell us about your relationship to the place. You know, you could go anywhere, do anything, so why KC?
That's a great question that has been asked many times, especially by other musicians. So I'm actually from Kansas City. My family's in the suburbs, but I'm sure that I would live somewhere else if Kansas City didn't serve my career so well. And if I wasn't satisfied with my work here. I do travel a lot and I play all over the country, like you said. Now that we're coming out of the pandemic and things are going on live and in person more, I'm home less than I was even before the pandemic. But it's a great place to be based. You know, if I'm going to pay rent somewhere and be traveling, Kansas City is a great place to do that. Whenever I'm home, you know, my roots here are deep and the scene is very vibrant with all kinds of music, world music, Irish music, jazz, blues. I find it to continuously be a place that proves worthy of my presence. But there's a lot of talent here. And I meet people all the time. You know, people are moving here. So I love Kansas City. It's a well-kept secret. But now everyone who's listening to this knows.
Yeah, interesting point about if there's any place to pay rent, you definitely don't want to be on the coasts.
It would be cool to live on the coast if I was actually going to be rooted, but I'm very much not rooted. I mean, I'm rooted here and I'm never here.
So as part of your Jewish journey, you were at one point the music director at the Temple Congregation B'nai Yehuda. What made you want to pursue that job and want to work on contemporary Jewish music like you do now with Rabbi Josh Warshawsky? Again, you've got like the whole music industry open to you pretty much. So how did you end up working on Jewish music specifically?
I actually didn't pursue that job. I was originally playing there as a gig, and I was just playing the piano for services on the weekends and holidays and festivals. And I didn't want a full-time job. And I was interim before I did take the full-time position. The thing is, I really love band leading. I love intentional music for prayer. But I also love the violin and all the different ways it can be played and all the different styles and genres in which it can exist. So I was pretty demanding of having time to do other things, and they were very demanding of wanting me to be there for the congregation, which I wanted to be, but also I would be lying if I didn't say that it takes a lot for me to feel fulfilled creatively. So I love Jewish music. I love all the different prayers and spaces that the music can create for different feelings to exist and different longings and things like that. So I like to make melodies and to make music and create the space for everything in Judaism. I mean, it's such a rich and vibrant tradition. There's so much that goes into liturgy throughout the year. But I also love to play in a bar to people that are drinking. I love to play in a club. I love to heavily entertain like a really ramped up crowd. Because music, the spirituality of music isn't just in the synagogue, it's everywhere. And it connects everyone in the room, even if they're not there to get connected in the room and pray. Like people go for how good music makes them feel. And I maintain that music makes you feel good because it connects everyone who can hear it. So I love writing Jewish music because it's so intentional and people come to Shul looking for it. They're thirsting for it. And I'm not a full-time music director anymore. because I like being able to collaborate with Rabbi Josh Warshawsky or any of my other friends that I play music with in the Jewish world. And yeah, I think I'm very happy with where things are right now as they stand.
I'm kind of curious to ask you how, like, when you're talking about being creatively fulfilled from all the sort of varied projects and different things that you do, what do you get out of Jewish music that you maybe don't get out of when you're doing like Irish fiddling, or that you do get out of Irish fiddling that still fits into your sort of religious worldview, but you don't necessarily get it in Jewish music? Like, it's sort of a weird question, but I'm kind of wondering how that breaks down what you're talking about across the different sort of genres that you tend to do.
When we're praying in the synagogue and everyone is gathered, we are making music that everyone can sing, which is beautiful. And I love to make melodies that serve a certain purpose, a prayerful purpose. But when I'm playing, world music, and that's just instrumental, and I can really explore the violin to like my fullest ability, it's a bit, I don't want to say self-indulgent, but it's like I'm not, I transcend any intention or thought or prayer, and I'm just kind of going off into space with musically. And that's not something, I can't just sit in the synagogue and get on the bima and just play like a 10-minute shred solo. It's like, it's not, I mean, maybe some people would get something out of that, but you know what I mean? Some people want to see that and see a performance, and the bima is not really a place where I want to perform. I want to invite everyone in.
I actually want to sort of poke on that a little bit more also, because I know I've done a little bit of song leading at Jewish summer camp up here in Wisconsin that serves the Twin Cities and also the Kansas City area. And part of the competing interest was always like, we want to get everyone singing and involved and like all together, but also for a long time, a lot of people just wanted to see people go up and perform. And that was like the song session. They just wanted to watch everybody else rather than be involved. So there's this really interesting mix of like, how much do you show off to get attention versus getting everyone in to have everyone singing, or else you might, because some people were disengaged if they didn't feel like there was a performance happening in some sense. So again, kind of wondering, when you're in a congregational sort of arena, how do you balance those things of kind of doing the more showy, but also drawing everyone in, specifically in that space, especially with your personal inclinations of like wanting to sort of be more expressive?
That's a nice way to say that I love to show off. I just need to be expressive. It depends on the context. If we're in Kabbalat Shabbat services or Shabbat morning services, I am much, much less likely to perform. In my mind, it's not a place where you perform. People are there to celebrate Shabbat and bring in that Shabbat, and I don't want to take away from that and make it about myself. If I'm doing like a concert on a Saturday night, or even a song session where I have everyone gathered and it's been advertised as an evening of everybody singing together, I might do some fun crowd interaction, some call and response things, or, just musical silliness that engages people and is entertaining in the moment. But, people don't come to Shul to be entertained unless it's for a special event, in which case I have definitely just entertained, whoever's there. But it really just depends. And sometimes if nobody's singing, then I will get more self-indulgent. And you and I both have been to concerts where the entertainment or the show, the performance was so powerful that it does kind of lead you back to yourself and give you some sort of higher experience because of the expressiveness of the performer or the showing off or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's a balance. It's a lot of reading the room and deciding what will serve the moment the best.
So how did the pandemic then change or affect, I guess, both your work as a musician, but also I'm curious to ask your relationship to Judaism in all this?
Yeah, I would say the pandemic was very cool. It strengthened my identity as a musician. It strengthened my Jewish identity. So Jewishly, everything was virtual. So I did some virtual work for synagogues everywhere, which was really cool. But I also had these small little intimate Shabbat morning and Kabbalat Shabbat services in my living room, which you see here. It was like a djembe player and maybe another guitar player, and maybe, everyone would sing, but I think at the most we had 5 people. And I kind of had like a pod, like a quarantine pod with a few friends. And so we got to explore services the way we would do it. And none of us were ordained clergy. So we would just use the Siddur and, open up and look up the Torah portion and talk about it. And it was really, really funny. I actually shaved my head at the beginning of the pandemic because I broke my leg like 4 weeks in. And so not only was I alone in my house, I had a broken leg and I had really long hair that I just, it's hard to bathe with a cast on your leg. So I just decided to shave my head. And one of my friends who comes over to play the djembe, he also shaves his head. So there was a Torah portion that was like, you shall not shave or smooth any part of your head. So that was, we had some really fun moments exploring Torah without any clergy. And then I started an outdoor concert series in my neighborhood where I invited local musicians, people who lived in the neighborhood, to perform on this rooftop, and people social distance in the streets. And we would raise money for random fundraisers that, a lot of people were really struggling during the pandemic. So we were able to give some to some local charities that help people out. So it was fun. I mean, I fell in love with music again. When it's not pandemic times, it's like my schedule would just get full and my violin would never come out of the case unless I was there contracted to play. And so when everything got canceled, I got to find myself with my instruments, playing what I wanted to play. And I did a series on my Instagram page of doing bim bom, bim bom, bim, bim, bim bom. I reharmonized it and rewrote it in like different styles and with different chord progressions. And so that was fun. I did a lot of virtual collaborations with friends, and I met congregations. So congregations were reaching out to people to connect with their communities over Zoom. And so people that I never would have met otherwise would hit me up, on Facebook or something, or they got my name through a friend or whatever. And then they'd have me Zoom in to New York or to Texas or Atlanta or, wherever they happen to be, Boise, Idaho, and I got to sing with a group of people that were hundreds of miles away. So I feel bad saying it because the pandemic was hard for a lot of people. It was hard for me too, but I loved it. And I'm already nostalgic for that first magical few months when it was this surreal nothingness that you could just create whatever reality you wanted, or at least I could. For some other people I know, especially people that had to suddenly start homeschooling their kids and things like that, I know it was really hard.
You sound like someone who, I know so many people who every time Zoom comes up, it's an attitude of, begrudgingly, we had to go on Zoom and start doing more Zoom stuff. You sound like you really didn't have a problem with doing sort of virtual music stuff, even though that obviously seems kind of like a transition from in-person audience to everyone in little screens. Did you struggle at all with that?
Well, obviously it would never be my choice. If I have a choice, I want to be in person. But how amazing is it that we have the technology to do what we did, because we couldn't be in person. So the weirdest thing was the first couple performances, giving my heart and soul to a song and then just looking at the screen and all the faces and I'm hyper aware of my empty house, just me with my microphone. Definitely an adjustment. But I grew to love it because I did have so many wonderful experiences connecting virtually.
Yeah. How are you feeling about how Jewish song leading has adapted to the times? Like, are things back up and running now to the same extent it was before the pandemic? Are you still looking at a lot of virtual gigging?
I think that I would say everything's like 90% back to normal, but almost everything I do, especially in the Jewish world, is also virtual. So even though I'm live and in person and people are showing up, a lot of people are masked, depending on what part of the country we're in and what the cases look like there. And a lot of people are still Zooming in. You know, there's a lot of immunocompromised people that just can't risk it. And so they still have access to live performance virtually. And so that's another gift, that people can have these events. And if you're not able to be there physically, you can at least Zoom in or Zoom in for part of it, which sometimes might be preferable depending on what it is. And it's just, I mean, I'm traveling everywhere now. So even though there's been a big adjustment, it's almost back to normal, even though the threat of another pop of cases seems to always be looming in the news. People are coming and showing up in person, at least in my personal life, and singing with me, which is great. Even if sometimes I have to be masked as well, which I'm happy to do, but we both know how hard it is to sing with a mask on. You're like breathing your mask in every time you're trying to take a deep breath and sing. But it's a small sacrifice to make to be in person.
And just out of curiosity, again, sort of touching on, I'm obviously asking you a lot about Jewish music, but do you have any particular projects or performances, Jewish or non-Jewish, that listeners should be on the lookout for in the near future? Anything sort of specific you have going on that's exciting?
Oh, boy. So I am going to be traveling with Nava Tehillah at the beginning of May. And I've always dreamed of playing with them. I've gotten to sit in with them a couple times. They have the Levite Circle that I've participated in, but I'll be playing violin on their short tour of the New England area. And so that'll be fun. I think some of it will be virtual. But then after that, I have stuff in Kansas City. Ensemble Iberica has some exciting world music performances coming up. And then my Irish rock band, Flanigan's Right Hook, we're playing a festival just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the end of June. And we'll also play the Kansas City Irish Festival this year in September. Other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Mostly just visiting congregations around the country and playing electric violin at a club in Dallas. It's a private club. And doing just a variety of events that I really need to update my website. I have a website, ColeenDieker.com, that I will update at some point. Adulting.
I gotta say, as a 24-year-old, it's always nice to see people older than me who are also kind of struggling with the adulting thing. It makes me feel a lot better. So thank you for being
I'm just
open
happy that I wasn't filing my taxes the night before. Happy tax day. Or sad tax day, depending. I actually filed like 2 weeks ago. So really proud of myself for that. Yeah, I'm 32 and I just got a website and I'm a freelance musician. So I just got a website within the past year. And, being an independent adult, there's so many different levels of operating as a quote unquote adult in our highly sophisticated modern society. But yeah, it's fun.
And for listeners, the website and also your Instagram handle is going to be in the podcast notes. I'll remember to throw that in there. I also want to ask you, if you're comfortable talking about it, how the intersection of your Korean American and Jewish identities play out for you. There's been a growing conversation over the past few years about Jews of color in the U.S. and how many Jewish institutions are not doing such a great job of being welcoming to the diversity of Jews that our community has today. And of course, recently there's also been a rise in both anti-Semitism and anti-Asian hate. So I don't mean to front load this with all sort of the negativity, but I think it's relevant and interesting to ask you, again, how sort of you're thinking about how your identities come together for you.
That is a big question. So another thing to note here is that I'm also a Jew by choice. And I converted in late 2016 during Hanukkah, and I grew up Catholic. So I'm actually half Korean, and I've been really lucky. I've never experienced like a personal attack of Asian hate or any anti-Semitism since my conversion. Mostly I experience a curiosity. I live in the Bible Belt, and there was a shooting at the Jewish Community Center here in 2014 that actually it killed 3 Christians, ironically. And it was just so tragic. And that was, now that I'm Jewish, I feel the weight of all the attacks that happen across the country much more deeply. But people around here and people in my own life that I meet that find out that I'm Jewish are mostly curious. They're just, a lot of people in the Midwest have never met a Jewish person, or someone that identifies as Jewish, or especially someone who chose it. But as far as being Asian, I don't get any discrimination in my life, mostly because I'm mixed. I'm sort of like white passing, I guess you would say. And I act white. So my mother is from South Korea, and she's mostly, very active in the Korean community here. And I grew up watching her kind of use it to her advantage, actually, like with the clerk, like the store clerk, she would just act like she didn't understand why the expired coupon didn't work. And then they would just be like, okay, fine, because she was so stubborn. And yeah, you can kind of get away with things. But as far as like the discrimination, of course, I feel connected to the Asian community at large and the Jewish community at large. And the world just always has some sort of hate going on and some darkness. And you could see it as it's growing, but also there's a lot of good things happening at the same time that, we have to be aware of rising anti-Semitism, but we also need to look for the fruits that are, the Jewish community coming closer together. And even like the conversation we were having earlier about the shrinking of the conservative and reform movements, like the shrinking of Jewish communities in general, it's actually causing a lot of communities to come together, like reform and conservative merging and people just coming together instead of, having separate communities 5 blocks away from each other. It's like, well, why don't we all come together? And I think there's going to be a lot of fruits that come out of all of this, even if it's hard to see.
So the last question I want to ask you before hopefully getting you to play something for the podcast is, what do you love about the Kansas City Jewish community?
I love how healthy and supportive the community is. Like there's a lot of people, that are involved in this sisterhood and that sisterhood. And there's a lot of community events that everyone attends. The Hebrew Day School has they're just really good at letting all the different kids from the different movements coexist together and find a way to learn together. And everyone feels like their respective traditions are honored. I'm starting to see a growth in sort of like a Jewish community outside of the synagogue, which is really cool. Like Jews just meeting to celebrate Havdalah together. That's not a shul event. So that makes me feel really good. That gives me a lot of hope for the future.
So on that note, then, it would be great to, if you've got sort of a favorite, Jewish melody that's been stuck on your mind, whatever you want to play, just to kind of hand it over to you.
Okay, I don't know what I'm going to play. Let me make sure I'm in tune. Do you have any requests?
You were talking about that bim bam with the different melodies. I don't know if that's something you could pull off with just you and a guitar.
Yeah, I can sing you my favorite one. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, bim bam, bim 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 Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Bim, bom, bim, 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 bom, bim, 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 bom.
That's extra perfect because this podcast goes out on a Thursday morning, which is right in time for people to hear it for Shabbat. So that was awesome. Yeah, I'm all out of questions and requests for music. I mean, I would love to have a whole concert, but obviously can't do that. But really just thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with me for this.
Great talking to you, and Shabbat Shalom to everyone listening.
The Getting to Know Jew podcast is a product of the Kansas City Jewish Chronicle and the Jewish Federation of Greater Kansas City. It is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network and produced by Jewfolk Inc. Please rate, review, subscribe, and share. If you have suggestions for future guests, please email the show at webmaster@jewishkc.org.